Today's conveyancing clients expect speed, clarity, and frequent updates. But tight margins and rising client expectations put pressure on conveyancing practices. With smart automation and clear workflows, Leap helps conveyancing teams spend less time on admin and more time supporting their clients. Learn more at leap.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today, I have Managing Director of Evolve Law, Mark Lansdell, on the podcast with me, and we're going to be talking about a social media post that Mark put up a little while ago, all about raising prices and more generally about current market conditions and conveyancing. No doubt there's plenty to be getting our teeth into. Thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I always start the discussions with a little bit of an introduction into our guests. So you're best placed to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your role at Evolve, please, Mark.
So I'm the Managing Director of Evolve Law. My role transitioned quite a lot over the years. So founded the business almost 10 years ago. And as you could expect at the time, so working on files, IT accounts, doing everything that was required to keep the business going. So that's transitioned quite a lot over the years. My role primarily at the moment sits around operations, compliance, and really looking at the technological advancements that are going on and looking at how we can create operational efficiency, maintain robust prices, and really just ensuring that the sort of business continues year on year.
I mean, what's your headcount now at the organisation?
So we have 25 people in the business. That's been fairly stable for the last couple of years. We've found really that we've been able to not increase our headcount as much as we probably need to as the growth sort of occurred, primarily because we look at operational efficiency and technology as part of that, not to replace lawyers, but mainly around sort of admin staff. We generally don't really recruit admin assistants into the business. The assistants that come in are typically on a sort of fast track to doing what we call blue work, and I'm sure we'll get into that later on, but it's sort of core fee earning work that generates income for the business. So we don't really have anyone that's sort of doing data entry or allocating, post and that sort of stuff. We get them stuck in pretty early.
And you, over the sort of past 6 months or so, my understanding is you've created a whether you call it an academy or whether you call it a kind of route, as you say, through the business to train people up. I mean, has that been well received, and how does that work internally?
Really well received. So to be honest with you, it was one of my visions when I started the business. I was really lucky when I trained many years ago, 2 decades ago, that I had excellent training. And for me, I love to learn. I'm always reading. I'm always trying to progress, not just in conveyancing and the law, but also reading around the subject. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of reading on consumer behavior, psychology of consumer behavior, but also, try to get, where possible, sort of up to date on AI and where the market's going in that respect. So for me, learning is really important. And, it took us a few years to get the training academy launched for various reasons. We're growing pretty fast and other things that we've got going on. So launched that. It's been really well received, really, really well received. And I think it's important to say with the training academy, we're not looking at just conveyancing and the law. I think, to be a good conveyancer, you've got to have a good customer service skills. You've got to have a little bit of kind of BDM, understand the finances of the business, understand the finances of a file, well-being. So there are modules within that training academy on a sort of 3-month rotation where we, at the end of the sort of 18 to 24 months, those coming through the academy will be really good conveyancers. So excellent lawyers, but also just good conveyancers as well, and fit for what the modern world looks like and what the future will look like. So they're really enjoying it. We mix up the sessions, we get external trainees in as well. And, part of that is the CLC qualification, which the guys have just started. So our view is, I think we all know in conveyancing that recruitment is hard, very, very hard at the moment. So our view is let's grow our own. Let's bring some conveyancers through that fit the Evolve model and how we see conveyancers within our business.
I really like the idea that we can train people the sort of black letter law stuff. That's largely obviously what law school does, if that's the route that people take, or some of the other sort of qualifications that are out there. But I firmly believe that there are some really critical soft skills in conveyancing that there's a lot of gaps in that training, and to some extent I don't think that universities and that kind of thing are particularly well suited to training on those things, are they? So I mean, I applaud you looking at that in the business and getting that into the training program.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. There's some excellent lawyers out there who probably wouldn't want to be a conveyancer, maybe fell into the role, but really understand the technicalities and the law, which is of course really, really important. But some of the best conveyancers that we've got in the business and also I've seen are those that have got fantastic customer service skills. They know how to look after their own well-being. They understand how to spin lots of plates. It's getting harder as a conveyancer, or to be a conveyancer. And I think, as a business, it's right that we teach those other skills as we go through that academy. And I think it's fair to say that we do that with the guys not on the academy as well, particularly around well-being. We tend to find that the sort of juniors that come into the business have a greater understanding of their own well-being. I'm sort of slightly jealous, really, because I'm a bit of a workaholic still and work through lunches, which is not a recommendation. But, do
as I say, not as I do.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But we learn from them as well. We understand, what because I'm still sort of new to this, listening and just understanding what it means to them and how we can build that into the course that we're sort of still building. But yeah, it's been really well received, really successful so far, and our plan is to extend that. We took 3 internal candidates to start with, so we could trial it, but also allow them to build the course with us. But we are looking in the future to get external candidates in and sort of grow that as the business grows.
I was at a conference recently, and one of the speakers was YouGov, the polling agency.
Yeah.
And the presentation was all about Gen Z. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast, Mark, so we're not going to sort of go down that route necessarily. But the kind of really interesting things that come out of that around some of their behaviors, particularly in relation to using things like the telephone and their correspondence techniques and their ability to use email cogently and actually that needing to be trained into them, which is probably bizarre to you and I, but when they're used to sort of text speak, it's no real surprise, is it? The whole presentation was about the employee as much as the client of tomorrow, and as I say, a whole different podcast, but the things like your training academy need to be thinking about and accounting for this influx of new young talent who operate very differently from you and I.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing for us is to, like I said previously, to listen. We can sit there as 20 plus years in conveyancing and still think that we know what's right. But actually, we can teach the conveyancing, we can teach the law, but the other soft skills that sit around that, we've got an idea. But actually, as you say, it's not just the employees that come in the training academy, it's the clients, because actually, we do have a generation of clients who are younger as well. So how do they want to interact with us? And actually understanding their behaviours, and that's clients range from sort of 18 right up to in their 70s. So it's understanding how we can shape the business to suit how we want to operate and offer that service, but equally how clients want to interact with us. So the best thing to do is listen. Just listen to comments, and some of it's negative, but you can learn from that. And that's really how we're shaping the academy, is just really being open to different ideas. And if we feel that a module needs changing, then we'll change it. We'll sometimes very quickly change a session when we're doing the session, because actually we'll get some really good feedback and it's really useful. So we'll use that feedback to then shape the academy moving forward, and always kind of sort of be dynamic in making sure that we're open to new ideas and how people want to interact with us.
I said at the start of the podcast that one of the primary drivers for us getting together and doing this podcast was a post that you'd put up on social media about the fact that you had taken what I would describe as a pretty bold decision to raise prices. You'd quite bullishly defended that. You've talked already about the fact that you've got healthy caseloads, that kind of thing. So talk me through some of that decision making. You've very consciously made the decision to put prices up within the business. That can't have been easy at a time when, particularly at the moment, things are quite challenging out there.
I'm probably going to answer that. No, I say it was easy. It was easy. So I'm obsessed with data.
Either that or you were cheap to start with, Mark.
Probably mid-market, I would say. So, but cheaper than I would have liked. So I'm obsessed with data numbers to an extent where, people say I should have been an accountant rather than a lawyer. I'm not sure whether that's, should have been the case or not, but equally, it sort of drives what we do as a business. So I got fed up. I got fed up with looking at the bill at the end of the transaction and really looking at my team and thinking, this isn't enough. You've worked your socks off. I can see, the energy and the time that's gone into that file. And that bill, I mean, it just isn't sufficient payment for what you've had to put into that transaction. So I had a bit of a wake-up call and thought, well, look, you're good with data, good with numbers. Let's just come up with a simple Excel spreadsheet. And let's look at how we can increase prices at £50 increments. And then let's look at the conversion rate. And there's a pinch point in there somewhere where actually if your conversion rate from leads to instructions drops, but your prices are higher, you'll actually make more money.
Yeah.
So when you actually sit down and think about it, it is really easy and it just takes 30 minutes. And we were able to increase our prices by, on average, we did it in increments, but about 500 quid per case.
Wow.
And our conversion rate probably only dropped 2%, but it sits sort of 6% above what I guess our sort of break-even margin would be, where we might need to consider dropping our prices again. But it's quite a simple exercise, and it blows my mind that actually others aren't looking at it. You have to be bold with it, you have to be brave with it, but you have to understand your data. You have to know your data, but also be aware of it, keep an eye on it, because if it does drop below that conversion point or that pinch point, then you might need to make a decision. But thankfully, we've been able to retain that conversion rate pretty high, and we shocked ourselves. We thought, okay, well, let's put the price up, let's see what happens. And I think, it's a good model to follow. And I think we are underpaid as conveyancers. You see a lot of it on LinkedIn, but I don't see a lot of price increases across the board. And I think it's perhaps a lack of understanding of the data and understanding how that plays into the decision-making process. But thankfully, we've got access to that data and we were able to make that call.
I often think about, and through the course of the podcast, people have probably heard me say this a few times, I often think about professional services in the context of my own experience. So my dad's GP, my mum was a teacher, and they both became head of department or senior partner by virtue of the fact that they'd been there the longest, or they were very good at their job. It didn't make them very good administrators. It didn't make them very good managers. And we suffer from this in professional services, don't we? We promote people because they're very good at their job, and we expect them to be able to go from being a very good conveyancer to being a very good administrator and manager, and we don't give them the tools to enable them to make that jump. I mean, this is a similar sort of scenario, I guess, isn't it? Like you say, if you've got access to the data but you don't know what you're looking at, then you can't make those informed decisions.
Yeah, I think so. I've always been quite entrepreneurial, so I think that's the reason I started Evolve in the first place, and business A levels and economics A levels. So I guess numbers and business has always been a passion of mine. But I think you're absolutely right. I think how many law firms truly understand the data? I mean, if you've got a decent case management system, it will be there. But how often do key decision makers sit down and look at it? Does it drive decision making? And I think that for us, probably the last 2 to 3 years, it's driven 95% of our decisions across the business because, speak with data, so it can't lie, really. As long as you've got good data in the system and it's correct, you can actually use that data to drive what you're doing, rather than sort of, back of a fag packet, lick your finger, stick it up in the air, which I guess to an extent was sort of how we did it at the start, because we didn't know any better. But I think you mature as a business owner and as a founder, and you keep learning and sort of reading around your subject, if you like, and then you start to understand how this stuff is really impactful. And it's helped us massively. We don't make any decisions in the business now unless there's a well thought out plan that's primarily driven by the data that we've got, and we're always looking to granularize that data as low as we can get it to make better decisions. So I think, in terms of sort of price increases and costs and profit margins, get a handle on the data, understand it. It's not really that difficult once you start looking, and you can use technology, AI to an extent, to make that stuff really easy for you as well. So I get a report from Claude every Monday, kind of looking into my spreadsheets and stuff and telling me where we were the week before and sort of, if we've fallen off slightly or we're ahead of target. So again, using what's available to you, I think, is a really good way of sort of making that process easier if you don't really understand numbers or it's not really a passion of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I always try in the podcast to articulate what listeners might be thinking or screaming at the podcast right now. And back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, well, we've got a very price sensitive clientele in conveyancing. Again, I hear that a huge amount. I get what you're saying about that conversion rate, price, pinch point, but ultimately you've had to go out and sell a higher price to the same clientele. What's that experience been like? How have you managed to get the staff to really buy into that? What does, is that a training process? Is it a case of, coming back to some of the staffing that we've talked about, is it a case of horses for courses? We give the people who are good at it the job of doing that kind of thing. I suspect it's a combination of all.
I think, it starts with firstly accepting that you're not going to win every case, and that's okay. I think it's not, it's a competitive market. I think lots of firms are still competing on price. In my view, that's absolutely the wrong way to go, but I understand that there's some business models where that drives what they do. For me, it's you're not going to win them all, and that's absolutely fine. As long as you know what that pinch point, the conversion is, that's absolutely fine. We're not for everyone. I think as well, being a good business in the first place, so having a good brand, being highly recommended on Trustpilot, Google, whatever review system or platform you want to use. So you sort of got to start from a good place. Because it's difficult to increase prices if your reviews aren't very good, or you sort of don't understand your business, or So I think for us, we start from a really good place. We're really proud of our brand. We're really proud of our review scores. Working with your introducers, as a business, we do have introducers, referral agreements. So working on that sales process and understanding that the decision-making process is not when the client comes to you or the lead comes to you. It's actually before that. It's, with the estate agents, with the broker, whoever it might be, working with them and saying, look, we are increasing our prices. Here are the reasons. It is still value for money. And really after that, sort of backing yourselves, you've got to deliver. You can't up your prices and then service standards drop, or you're not delivering on the increased price that you've put out there. And that's sort of it, really.
There's no secret sauce necessarily to this. It's a case of what you're saying is being bold and similarly emboldening your staff as well.
I think so. From a staff point of view, they love it because at the end of the transaction, the invoice probably still doesn't reflect how they feel about the effort, but equally it feels better. It's nice when you've got a decent invoice and you feel like you've worked really hard for that client and you're being paid probably what the most you could get. It's meant that we've been able to reduce caseloads. So I think I put on LinkedIn as well, but we actually did less completions last year, but as revenue wise, that was up by 12%. So they feel happier because they have reduced caseloads. They're getting paid well at the end of the transaction, and all the benefits of having increased profit margins, which means you can invest in high salaries and the technology and the systems that we use, office spaces, lovely things for the guys to do. So there are so many good things, but I think I've always been quite bold in my decision making, and it is a bold decision, but if you back yourself, you've got a good business, it is possible. You've just got to hang on tight in those first few months, particularly if the conversion starts to drop, because the panic sets in and you think, and I had it with our team. We need to drop our prices. No, I'm quite stubborn as well. So no, we're absolutely not doing it, and it's worked. So it's a bold move, but I think law firm owners and managers will be shocked if actually they just took the plunge and did it, and they'll probably find that they'll still get the amount of instructions and leads they need to support the business, and reduce caseloads and sort of less work for their teams as well.
What was the reaction of referrers? You said that that's part of your business model. Again, it's quite difficult to go to people that you've worked with and say to them, look, you're going to get the same service, but I'm going to charge you, at £500. I'm guessing, 15, 20, perhaps even higher percent, increases. That's not an easy conversation to have with people.
It's not, but I think for all the reasons that I've said, really. So, it's that sales piece, isn't it? So if you've got good relationships with your introducers anyway, you can have those candid conversations. I think for me, it's getting them to understand what the benefit is to them, faster transactions, happier staff. We can invest more in technology. It's understanding that there's a benefit to them as well, because they've got to sell this to the client, right? Mm-hmm. They might have 2 or 3 law firms that they introduce. We are, in the main, the most expensive. But with a lot of these introducers, we win the most amount of work, because actually they're doing the sales piece for us, because they understand that actually we are investing those additional funds back into the business. And the important thing after that is doing what you said you were going to do. So if you just take that increase in profit and take more dividends, or you don't share it with the staff and you have a high staff attrition, then that doesn't wash for very long. So I think, it's making sure you commit to those principles that you said you were going to do. And actually, once they start to see the improvements in the service delivery, it's an easy sell for them. They are more expensive, but hey, guess what? They're probably going to get the deal through quicker for you, and you'll get a better service. And what we found as well is in the last few years, clients are willing to pay for that better service. There's always going to be a section of clients who want the cheapest. Primarily that's driven, I think, because they don't understand what we do. So why would you pay more for essentially the same job? That's an educational piece that we need to deliver as conveyancers. But I think, clients are happy to pay that extra money for a better service, more personable service, better technology. So I think, it's that consumer behavior and understanding that not all clients want cheap. Some are very happy to pay, but you've got to deliver on it. That's the secret sauce. You've got to deliver, because as soon as you don't deliver, you're more likely to get complaints. You're more likely to get grumbles, because they are paying more money. So you've got to understand the whole piece really to get there.
Caveating the question with the fact that you can only ever go as quickly as the slowest part of the chain. Has your new model, your what you're doing on pricing, improved the transaction times, measurably?
Honestly, no. And where we can control things, so we're fortunate that we're able to act on both sides of transactions. CLC, a regulated firm, we're allowed to do it, whether people agree with that or not. We don't have any historical issues with that, and the CLC are very happy. But we are about 5 to 6 weeks quicker than we are when we're in a chain of transactions. So I would love to sit here and say all of the reasons that I've spoken about, that we are super quick and we've been able to magically, turn deals around in 8 weeks. That's not the case. We're probably sitting around 15 weeks at the moment, which is not something I'm proud of, but there are external factors that I'm sure you've just sort of mentioned. We are still looking at ways that we can drive that increased communication. We don't want to be that law firm that sort of sends chaser emails all the time, because we understand that everyone's busy. But equally, I think as a profession, that's definitely something we've got to look at across the board, because nobody's happy with it. Clients aren't happy with it. Introducers aren't happy with it. We're not happy with it as conveyancers. So for me, that's a huge piece of work that, we're one law firm, but I think if we all sort of, start to really think about how we can drive speed in transactions, I think we're all going to be happier.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned about the fact that you've had very positive reviews, and that this was a decision that was born out of the fact that you really wanted to leverage that. Again, sort of looking back at the decision and the impacts it's had on the business, has it had a positive impact on your review platform? It's not something that comes up in the podcast a huge amount, but it's so important, isn't it? We have this culture now. Consumers have this culture where they look at reviews and they'll put a lot of stock in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the main. I mean, we're very proud of our reviews, and we direct clients, particularly because we are more expensive, to have a look at competing firms, look at their reviews, understand what people are actually saying. So don't just look at the stars. Actually look at what people are saying. Look at the length of the reviews. If somebody's bothered to sit and write quite a lengthy review about individuals or parts of your systems or aspects of your business, have a look at those reviews, because those are the things that will be really meaningful to you. It's definitely had an impact, I think, in the way clients see us. Again, I go back to the fact that you've got to deliver, right? So if you are charging a higher price and you can deliver, clients are really, really keen to review your business. They'll go online, they'll shout about you, Facebook groups, Trustpilot, Google, and that really drives you forward without the need to sort of introduce a panel or network of estate agents that you work with. Repeat and recommended clients are fantastic, because they're the ones that are shouting about your business. They're the ones that are telling their friends down the pub about how great you are. So I think you've got to deliver. I think that's the key. It's absolutely the key. You've just got to make sure you've structured your business that when you say we are more expensive because we deliver, you've just got to make it happen.
I think we're sort of fast running out of time we have for the discussion. I think the other thing I often think about with this particular issue is, if you can make a little bit more money and you can reduce the stress on staff, you're a forward-thinking business as well. You've got investment in technology. It makes you a much better prospect from a recruitment point of view as well. And we know that young lawyers are basing their decisions as to whether they join firms, not just on whether they can get a training contract or not. We know that they're like gold dust, but as much about, are they the right fit for me from a technology point of view? Are they the right fit for me from a cultural point of view? And that's a really important part of certainly younger recruits' decision making. Again, from my understanding, and as I say, from some of the reading and some of the stuff that we've published through today's Conveyancer as well.
I think it is. I think, for me, it generates excitement in your business. So we don't want to be tied to our desks all the time. Conveyancing is hard. It's stressful. You feel like you need to always be at your desk dealing with the emails, phone calls, and any time away from your desk is wasted time. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that the new generation of lawyers coming through are using these pieces of technology in their personal life. So actually, there's almost an expectation when they come into any company that they're experimenting, probably the wrong word, but certainly looking and investigating how these pieces of technology can interact with them, but also with clients. But it makes the day more exciting. So you're not sort of just answering emails and phones. You're actually part of, and we're very good as a business at inviting colleagues across the board to come into these conversations at a very early stage. We've got an innovation challenge going on at the moment. It's going to run for Q3. Team based, looking at what is your biggest headache within your team, and come up with a technological solution to make that better. And they've really grasped it. They've got hold of it, and there's some competitiveness between the teams, and some are looking at AI and how that can support parts of what they do. Some are looking at sort of functionality and capacity exercises and making sure the right people are working on the right tasks. So I think don't be afraid to ask your colleagues what they're seeing. I think as leaders and owners, we sit there and we think we know all the answers. I certainly don't. But give it to them, get them involved in these projects, get them excited. So when they're coming into work on a Monday morning, not just thinking, another week in conveyancing, they're actually sat there and discussing how they can innovate. That will drive the business forward. It won't be me. I can come up with all crazy ideas and decide how we're going to do things, but they will drive the business forward and they will come up with the solutions for the future.
Fantastic. Mark, it's been great to have you on the podcast. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything other than a very frank and honest conversation about current state of conveyancing, and we could have gone off in any number of different directions, but I really appreciate you sharing some of your insight into some of the decisions that you've made in the business over the past few months. So thanks very much indeed.
Loved it. Thanks for having me.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Mark. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.